The world has ended, not with a bang, but with silence. Cities crumble, governments vanish, and the few survivors left fight not for peace, but for power. Among them stands Kim Minna, a ruthless yet magnetic woman who learned that kindness has no place in this new world. To survive, she became something far worse than the monsters outside the gates. In this world, every alliance is a lie, every promise a weapon. The strong enslave the weak, and trust can get you killed. Yet even in the ruins, humanity clings to hope, fragile, foolish, and easily broken. Because when fear becomes the new law, monsters are born not from infection, but from desperation. But when a mysterious man appears, alive when no man should be, everything changes. Whispers spread, bullets fly, and a new order begins to form amidst the chaos. Between gangs, warlords, and corrupted soldiers, humanity itself becomes the enemy. And as the lines between the living and the dead blur, Kim Minna must decide what she's willing to sacrifice to stay alive. In a place where mercy died long ago, survival isn't just a choice, it's a sin. This is the story of power, betrayal, and the price of humanity in a broken world. He remains the sole surviving human on the entire planet. Each day seemed to blur into the next, leaving him with the sense that time had left him behind. With no one remaining to hold him back, he now had access to every resource he desired. His bed sat boldly in the center of the street, as if he paid no mind to anyone passing by. He repurposes an ancient relic over 1,000 years old as his chamber pot, a choice both ridiculous and lavish. With no one around to observe him, he finds no purpose in putting on clothes. He rises at 6 in the morning, searching his house for anything edible to start the day. He offers oatmeal to his free-range chickens, giving them a special treat. A handful of ripe strawberries served as an ideal treat for the afternoon. He drives a fire truck through the fields, spraying water over his corn plants. Gasoline is poured into the generator, bringing energy to his improvised shelter. He flicked on the radio and cycled through the stations, following his regular routine. As usual, silence filled the air, just as it had every day for the past 3 years. Once he completed all of his chores, he made his way to the biggest football field, preparing to play in a World Cup final match against a model. He skillfully maneuvered the ball down the court, aimed carefully, and sent it soaring straight into the net for a flawless score. He lifted his arms and loudly declared that the national team would have already qualified if he were a member. Even though he had completed every task he planned, just 2 hours had slipped by. Having run out of things to occupy his time, he idles away the hours by sitting beside a model. To pass the time and escape their boredom, they immersed themselves in marathon sessions of Hollywood and international movies. As darkness settled over the city, anticipation filled the air, signaling the start of his favorite time of day. He extended his arms above his head, letting out a long yawn before making his way down into the dimly lit underground parking garage. He decided to take the out for an exciting drive that day. He raced along the highway, exhilaration and a sense of liberation surging through him. The man rises to his feet and bellows into the darkness, his solitude echoing in every sound he makes. Without warning, he comes to an abrupt halt, his face twisting in fear when he catches sight of a shadowy figure looming in front of him. In a sudden rush of fear, he swerved the wheel sharply to one side. The vehicle came to a sudden, ear-piercing stop right before it was too late. Despite their efforts, they collided forcefully with the guardrail. He ignored the fresh scratches marking his face, showing no concern for his injuries. He picked up a flashlight and directed its beam forward. His heartbeat thundered in his chest, a mix of anxiety and anticipation flooding through him. A small girl appeared within the shaft of light, cradling a sheep in her arms. Upon spotting another human being, her emotions surged even higher than his. Tears streamed down her face as she wept without restraint. She rushed toward him and wrapped her arms around him, holding on as if she never wanted to let go. As her arms wrapped around him, a gentle warmth spread through his chest, and for the first time, he allowed himself to trust that he truly had someone by his side. He led her to his shelter, where he generously shared a variety of foods with her. The girl ate with such eagerness that it seemed she had been starving for a long time. After finishing her meal, she informed him that numerous survivors remained scattered elsewhere. He switched on the satellite radio, and after many years, finally picked up a strong signal. Social stability had already been re-established in North. Offices had been established in 26 different cities worldwide, serving as centers for reconstruction efforts and places where survivors could be brought together. No matter if someone wanted to move to North or restore their home nearby, the United Coalition guaranteed assistance. The man's surprise overwhelmed him, as if an unstoppable herd of alpacas charged wildly through his thoughts. A sudden surge of excitement rushed through him, electrifying his entire being. After 3 long years spent roaming deserted ruins in complete isolation, he had come to believe believed that solitude was all he would ever know. Yet, the unexpected sight of other people reignited a spark of hope within him. That same night, both decided to set out for the closest city where a coalition outpost could be found. When morning arrived, they gathered their gear and made careful preparations for the trip ahead. Seated in the driver's seat of a tough G-Wagon, the group set off on their journey. As they traveled, human skeletons appeared from time to time, serving as grim evidence of the world's downfall. During their break, he gave the girl a lesson in driving. As they traveled, the group stumbled upon an old orchard left untended in the quiet countryside. The girl climbed out, eager to investigate, and soon noticed an abundance of watermelons and grapes continuing to grow nearby. He threw her an empty crate, instructing her to gather some fruit while he stepped away for a short time. Before he could make much distance, she hurried after him, her expression clearly showing her panic. Upon learning about his plan to search for supplies, she firmly expressed her desire to join him. Letting out a sigh, he passed her another crate before explaining that they needed to separate in order to reach by the next day. He instructed her to collect more fruit, assuring her he would return shortly. She pushed the grapes aside, her trembling voice pleading for him to stay, tears shining in her eyes as her sorrow became impossible to hide. He paused momentarily, then reached out to tenderly brush her cheek. In a quiet voice, he admitted that although she might have lost her appetite for grapes, he suddenly found himself wanting them. He gazed at her with unwavering determination, assuring her that she should stay where she was. He vowed never to abandon her, emphasizing that they were now bound together as family. He started the engine and sped away, while the girl and her small lamb remained rooted in place, silently observing as his figure faded far down the road. He soon came across a deserted telecommunications building in the vicinity. He managed to recover several phones, along with other pieces of communication equipment, experimented with various social applications, setting up accounts and exploring their features. After some trial and error, she managed to join an overseas platform. To their surprise, they discovered that many people from their own country were already active on it. The discovery filled them with renewed excitement, as if a spark of hope had burst back to life within them. They pressed down on the accelerator, racing toward where they needed to go while locked in a struggle. After the excitement faded, the man's natural senses took over. He sensed that something was wrong. For the past 3 years, he had wandered through deserted towns, never once encountering another person. Now, faced with a crowd of people seemingly materialized out of nowhere, he was left bewildered. Before he managed to make sense of the situation, revealed news that was even more unsettling. The most recent report from the North American Union stated that, across all worldwide outposts, no living men had been discovered. The announcement left the man in a state of shock. A moment passed before he erupted with wild laughter, his mind racing with the realization that if there truly were no other men left, he alone remained. He couldn't believe it. He had become the ideal man every woman seemed to desire. The whole situation felt unreal, almost as if he might burst out laughing and snap back to reality at any moment. He stopped hurrying along his path and chose to take a side trip, arriving at an abandoned hot spring resort. He steered the G-Wagon directly through the entrance and stopped it in the main hall, showing no sign of uncertainty. The character seemed confused, wondering aloud if they were supposed to go biting today. He smiled mischievously, deciding that today would be different. Instead of the usual routine, he planned to treat her to a relaxing hot spring bath and provide her with fresh clothes. His goal was for her to arrive at biting the next day looking absolutely stunning. She felt a surge of happiness, her spirits lifting at the prospect of enjoying some well-deserved rest. Her initial thrill soon disappeared, as she realized it was just a warm pool heated by immersion rods. During moments such as these, the simple comfort of a hot bath seemed like a rare indulgence that few people had the chance to experience. After making sure the water had warmed, the man stood and began searching for fresh clothes to give to Yi. The moment he stepped outside, a crucial question unexpectedly crossed his mind. He hurried back and shouted a warning, telling them to disconnect the heater before entering, emphasizing the risk involved. Before he had a chance to complete his sentence, a sharp, piercing scream erupted from Yi in the bathroom. She had taken off all her clothes, leaving nothing to the imagination. Now, the only man left in the world had witnessed it all. Feeling deeply embarrassed, he quickly turned on his heel and rushed out of the room. The following morning, as the group approached the initial meeting area in the chilly air, his eyes caught sight of movement in the distant fields, shapes shifting as if tending to crops. She eagerly lowered the car window and leaned out, enthusiastically greeting them with a cheerful wave. However, when they approached, the man's face shifted dramatically. It became clear that the women were not tending to crops. Instead, they were in the act of cutting another woman's throat. He instantly sensed that something was amiss and urgently shouted too, urging her to accelerate and escape the situation. The car raced off into the distance while the women watched in silence, their faces betraying no emotion as they fixed their icy gazes on the departing vehicle. Blood continued to trickle from the ends of their blades, creating a haunting scene. As the group drew closer to the city of Biding, A chilling sight met their eyes, women's bodies suspended from the overpass, presenting an even more terrifying scene than before. The man's features grew stern as his gaze settled on Yi. With a grim resolve, he conveyed the unsettling realization that relying on biting might not offer the safety they once believed it did. When the group approached the city's entrance and drew closer to the spot mentioned in the broadcast, they found their path blocked by a barricade. A watchful band of women, each holding weapons, kept a careful vigil, their gazes sharp with mistrust. The group's leader immediately noticed the man sitting within the car. In a world where no other living man had ever been discovered, his sudden appearance triggered immediate suspicion. People quickly aimed their weapons at him, demanding that he exit the vehicle without delay. The man snatched a wrench from the nearby car, bracing himself to defend his life. At that moment, someone called out from the side to assure Nana that the newcomers were friends. A young girl, her hair neatly styled into 2 braids, hurried over with quick, eager steps. She immediately responded, her unfamiliarity with the environment clear in her actions. Being new, she was still unaware of how things operated there, and the others were advised not to pay too much attention to her behavior. She had once trained as a swimmer at a sports school, where she often joked about receiving so many hormone injections that her Adam's apple nearly bulged. While speaking, she reached into her bag, took out several pieces of chocolate, and offered them to Nana. Chocolate had become an uncommon treat during these difficult days. As soon as Nana obtained some, she silently gestured for them to proceed, offering no further comment. Inside the car, Yi expressed heartfelt gratitude to the girl with braids for coming to their rescue. The man bent closer, curiosity flickering in his eyes as he wondered about the identities of those individuals. The girl responded in a laid-back manner, explaining that the army controlled everything within the second ring. She made it clear that no ordinary people were permitted to enter, and emphasized that imposters, especially those pretending to be men, were strictly forbidden. Hurried to speak, trying to insist that the man was genuine, but before she could finish her sentence, the man interrupted her with a composed question, asking if she knew the current location of the survivors' outpost. The girl lifted her shoulders in a casual shrug, remaining unfazed by the situation. Although she and her group had been forced to leave the second ring, she assured the others that she still knew the way and could guide them there. The girl with braided hair suddenly insisted that the small lamb be handed over to her. The character considered taking the other person's handgun as an alternative. While she continued talking, she firmly pushed the cold barrel of the gun against the man's forehead. He stood his ground, showing no sign of fear. The lamb had always been by Yi's side, and she refused to let it go. The girl paused, fixing her gaze on him before abruptly stepping away with a casual shrug. She relented, silently agreeing to guide him to the outpost. As they approached their destination, she remarked in a relaxed tone that she would be getting out at that spot, noting that the foreigners who managed the place were not particularly fond of her. As she began to exit the car, the lamb was already cradled in her arms. The man moved quickly, seizing her wrist and bringing her to a halt. His gaze remained steady and unwavering, locking directly onto her eyes with a calm intensity. She paused for a moment, released a quiet sigh, and gently relaxed her hold on the lamb. Just as they were about to go their separate ways, the girl with braided hair cocked her head to the side and flashed a sly grin, admitting that he truly possessed a surprisingly rugged charm. Once the man and Yi had left in their car, she remained in place as they vanished from sight, her lips curving into a secretive, confident smile. The pair reached the survivor outpost that was close by. Hardly had they entered when a crowd of women surged forward, quickly encircling the man with excited energy. Several people became so thrilled that they began taking pictures eagerly, as if they had just spotted a famous celebrity. The man shook off his daze and quickly grabbed his phone, his gaze sharpening as he focused on the message displayed. She had shared his picture on the Survivor Network, which was the last remaining social media site. In just a few minutes, responses began flooding in. The man sensed danger and quickly decided to walk away. The woman who had posted the photo firmly seized his arm, making it clear through her determined grip that she would not allow him to leave. He was stunned to discover that the woman held him with unbelievable strength. No matter how hard he tried, he was unable to escape her grasp. At that moment, a group of vehicles sped rapidly in their direction, sending billowing clouds of dust swirling into the air. A striking woman stood on the roof of a car, her voice smooth and unhurried as she asked for her latest companion. Next to her was the girl who had offered her assistance before. The woman standing there was who led the army as its commander. There was no question that Braid had been the one to bring her to this place. Flashed a sly grin, thinking how a long time had passed since she last sparred with a man. In her mind, she claimed this one for herself tonight. A woman with hair hurried ahead, determined to step in and stop what was happening. The instant she began to speak, pulled the trigger and put a bullet through her head, acting without pause or compassion. As the fell to the ground, blood spreading beneath her, the man's anger exploded. He charged with a ferocious yell, desperately attempting to pry the gun from her grasp. Was taken by surprise prize and for a brief moment found herself unable to resist. In an instant, she spun her body with remarkable speed. The man crashed down onto the ground after being forcefully hurled. Minho prepared to showcase her strength, but before she could act, the man sprang to his feet with a quick athletic hip up and trapped her head firmly in his grasp. The pair locked together, their limbs entwined as they stumbled and spun, resembling a wild and humorous dance battle spiraling out of control. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the man trapped her in a firm arm bar, a powerful submission hold that offered little chance for her to break free. As he pressed down, his eyes fluttered upward, clearly revealing the tension she was experiencing. The guards grew uneasy, realizing their leader was in real danger of being defeated. However, right before they could step in, his lips curled into a sly, self-assured smile as she effortlessly loosened his grasp with just one hand, making the task appear easy. Without showing any sign of effort, she tossed him to the ground. Without pausing, she struck him sharply across the face and curled her lips into a sneer, making it clear that she wouldn't have given him a second glance if he weren't the only man left in the world. Feeling deeply embarrassed, the man lost control of his temper. With all the strength he could gather, he hurled his left fist toward her. With remarkable ease, she snatched it out of the air using only 3 fingers. He swung his right arm in a sudden burst of aggression. Once more, she used just 3 fingers to clamp down on both of his hands, holding them in place with an unyielding grip that felt as strong as iron. A chilling realization slowly dawned on him as he wondered if the catastrophe had changed women as well. The unsettling possibility crossed his mind that he might now be the most vulnerable creature left in the world. In a frantic attempt to break free, he lashed out its legs, but she remained completely unfazed. Rather than reacting, she glanced down at him, her lips curling into a taunting grin. Without warning, a gigantic shadow cast itself over her, swallowing her in its presence. A determined black woman charged onto the scene, driving a bulldozer that she brought to a sudden halt between, and the man, rescuing him just in time. The woman gained a legendary reputation for the way she restrained from behind. The man hurried into the car and with trembling hands struggled to get the engine running. Right before he could leave, he noticed Yi concealed close to the entrance. He paused briefly, uncertain of what to do next. Ultimately, he found himself unable to abandon her. Despite the danger and flying bullets, he dashed forward, seized her arm, and pulled her in the direction of the car. The woman responsible for revealing his whereabouts appeared once more, stepping forward to obstruct their way. Anger surged within him, and he blamed her for everything that had gone wrong. Acting without a second thought, he raised his wrench and struck forcefully, silently demanding that nothing stand in his path. Noticed his attempt to flee, and instantly raised her voice in alarm. They hurried after the fleeing figure, determined not to let him escape. Before the crew had a chance to make much progress, the bulldozer smashed through the car's roof as though it were nothing more than fragile paper. Fueled by fury, Minho climbed onto the bulldozer with a gun clutched tightly and shouted at the top of his lungs, demanding death for the one he called a traitor. However, as gazed into the black woman's eyes, she noticed a steady, inscrutable expression staring back at her. A sudden sense of unease washed over her as she realized that something was amiss. As she glanced over her shoulder, she caught sight of the excavator hurling an entire car directly toward her. With a resounding boom, the vehicle dropped precisely onto its target, colliding with the excavator in a deafening explosion of metal. At the same time, the man hurried into the car with Yi, both of them rushing to make their getaway, extended her arm, and forcefully closed the door behind her. Just as the door began to close, a hand reached in from the outside and stopped it. A recognizable face appeared in the doorway, Braids, wearing her usual cheerful grin. She greeted with her signature phrase, "Hey, backslash." The man's eyes grew large with surprise. He pressed down hard on the accelerator, sending the car speeding ahead in silence. Despite the vehicle accelerating, Braids gripped the door firmly and stubbornly refused to release her hold. She called out, asking where he was headed and begging to be allowed to join him. Desperation filled her voice as she insisted that she was trustworthy, promising she was a good person. Lost his temper, accusing the other person of betraying them to the army. Braids remained completely unfazed, her grin bold and unapologetic. She tried to smooth things over, assuring them not to be upset. She promised to lead both of them south, where she claimed to have plenty of hidden supplies waiting. Braids painted a tempting picture of a new life for the 3 of them, her, the other woman, and the man, all together. She even joked about how comfortable it would be. One man with 2 wives, making for a snug arrangement, stood frozen, her mouth wordless, and her eyes widened with shock. The man let out a furious roar, scoffing at her hopes, then yanked the steering wheel sharply in an attempt to throw her off balance. He delivered a strong kick to Braids' hand as he held onto the door. Braids' fingers slipped at last, sending her tumbling downward. At the very last moment, she grabbed hold of the lamb's leg. The lamb began to struggle for breath, foam bubbling from its mouth, while its legs thrashed desperately violently in fear. Tears streamed down her face as she struggled with the thought of having to give it up, her heart heavy with sorrow. The man raised his voice, urging for the release, warning that it would not survive otherwise. Finally, she wondered if she would cry out through her tears and find the strength to release her grip. At last, she let her braids tumble down, seeming as bothersome as a pendant swinging endlessly, slumped into her chair, buried her face in her hands, and sobbed uncontrollably. Their sense of safety quickly faded when the man glanced in the mirror and noticed two vehicles speeding up behind them, drawing closer with every second. His expression fell in shock and disbelief as he silently refused to accept what was happening. The army, known as one of the largest remaining groups on the planet, had tracked them down once more. In the front vehicle, his face lit up with pure excitement, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a very long time. Without a hint of embarrassment, she made it clear to herself that she desired that man. She urged him to return with her, proposing that he become her warlord husband so they could take control of this place together. The man fixed his gaze forward, his face devoid of warmth, silently making it clear that she was not the kind of person he was interested in. A smile curled on his lips, gradually distorting into a fierce snarl as he silently dared her to mold him into whatever she desired. She ordered her troops to close in and keep the fugitive from escaping. Without a moment's pause, the man sharply turned the wheel and crashed his vehicle straight into his bright red sports car. A sudden crash knocked her off balance, causing her to tumble across the seats. The man abruptly slammed on the brakes, causing one of the pursuing cars to speed ahead of him. Seizing the moment, he crashed his vehicle into the back wheel of the car as it passed. The enemy's vehicle suddenly veered out of control, tumbling over and soaring away from the roadway. As soon as he managed to steady his breathing, he glanced upwards. Minho was suspended above the ground, launching himself toward the car with the ferocity of a villain from the end of the world. The man let out a furious scream, his face twisted with disbelief as he demanded to know what could possibly be wrong with the other person, questioning if they had lost their mind. Touched down smoothly just beyond his window, her posture unwavering and poised. A composed yet menacing smile curled on her lips as she looked at him. In a quick, fluid movement, she lifted her right hand. With a powerful blow, her fist shattered the glass, and grunting with effort, she tore the entire window from its frame before flinging it aside. Just as she was about to act, the thunderous sound of engines burst to life behind them. A group of bikers, each astride uniquely modified motorcycles, swept forward with the force and intensity of a cavalry attack from a dystopian world. His eyes narrowed as her face grew stern. In a low voice, she spoke the name of the Brotherhood. At the front of the group, a woman with a raised her voice, declaring that she and her companions had come to resolve unresolved issues with concerning men. Let out a mocking laugh, feeling both surprised and triumphant that the Bai gang, who had managed to evade her for months, had finally revealed themselves so easily. She curled her lip in disdain, looking over the group of women who spoke boldly. In her mind, she wondered if they believed themselves to be men now. Before she had a chance to finish speaking, Braids suddenly pulled out a gun and unleashed a rapid burst of gunfire. Several motorcycles suddenly burst into fiery explosions, their engines roaring before being consumed by flames. The Brotherhood stood their ground, undeterred. Among them, a rider wearing a helmet reached for a fire extinguisher. A torrent of dazzling foam burst through Braid's car window, pouring inside with overwhelming force. A different rider, recognizable by his wild, spiked hair, sparked a string of fireworks to life. The object flew through the air and landed directly inside Bray's vehicle. Firecrackers erupted beneath, sending bursts of noise and light all around her. Overwhelmed by fear, she thrashed about, unable to control her movements. The sleek sports car veered wildly, slipping from her control. In the blink of an eye, the object vaulted past the guardrail and vanished down into the depths of the ravine, launched herself onto the roof of the man's racing car, diving into the turmoil with the agility of a wildcat. She gestured toward his group and loudly challenged him, urging the so-called imposter to step forward and prove himself. Without a moment's delay, gang's crew launched their grappling hooks into action. One creature clamped onto the man's car door, producing a sharp metallic noise. The man gazed ahead, his eyes wide with shock as confusion flooded his mind, struggling to comprehend the bizarre situation unfolding before him. The leader of the bike gang raised a massive battle axe and used the grappling line to glide through the air as if riding a zip line. Landing with force on the rear of the vehicle, the figure began moving forward, heading toward the roof. Sweat began to bead on the man's forehead as he hurriedly grabbed the steering wheel, desperately trying to turn it. Despite the tension, the gang reassured with a calm demeanor, letting it be known that they were allies, not enemies. With a burst of strength, she launched herself forward and brought her axe down in a sweeping arc aimed at. The two reigning forces of chaos battled fiercely on the roof of the speeding vehicle, with skillfully evading every attack that came her way, her determination as strong as ever. In the midst of the brawl, swiftly pulled out her handgun and unleashed a volley of shots toward the members of the gang. To her astonishment, moved with impossible speed, evading the flying bullets even as she kept her balance atop the speeding vehicle. Their rooftop battle raged on, each combatant narrowly evading the other's attacks, one slipping past the swing of an axe, the other sidestepping bursts of gunfire. The scene unfolded like a wild and violent dance, neither side gaining the upper hand. From his position below, the man noticed an opportunity as lifted her leg to deliver a kick. He pressed down hard on the brakes, bringing the vehicle to a sudden stop, stumbled and fell forward across the hood of the car, her pistol slipping out of her grasp and soaring away. The woman shouted angrily at the man, promising to handle the situation with him later that night. Snarling fiercely, she vaulted back onto the rooftop and threw herself into the fray once more. She advanced with determination, forcing the gang to retreat as she seized control of the fight. The man did not stop. Instead, he continued to press on the brakes repeatedly. The impact made stumble, her body swaying unsteadily with every sudden shake. Anger boiled over, causing her to lose control. She forcefully kicked open the sunroof, then thrust the sharp heel of her shoe directly into the man's nose. At that precise instant, Gang spotted an opening and took action. She swung her axe forcefully, aiming the heavy blade straight at its back. A heavy, unsettling sound rang out, quickly joined by the faint cry of her voice barely escaping the stifling silence. Against all odds, she evaded the attack by darting aside at the final moment, her movement so swift and silent that she seemed to vanish like a phantom. She glared at the gaping rip in her expensive fur coat, her eyes blazing with anger as she blamed the person responsible for its destruction. She acted instantly, sending the gang flying off the rooftop with a powerful kick. The group lost their balance and nearly fell, but someone quickly grabbed the car window's edge, saving them just in time. Lifted her axe high, preparing herself to deliver a powerful blow. Without warning, the man brought the vehicle to a sharp halt. Its balance slipped, causing her to stumble back unsteadily. Gang took advantage of the moment and pulled her leg forcefully. The man, his nose still trickling blood from before, gripped the steering wheel tightly and pulled it with all his remaining strength, plunged from the rooftop and landed hard on the pavement below. For the first time, the formidable warlord's confidence cracked, and desperation filled her eyes. She called out to her beloved, pleading for help. For just an instant, witnessing the chaotic sight awakened a faint sense of sympathy within the observer. The man remained silent, his gaze fixed on her as she lay stretched out before him, while a thin stream of blood dripped from his nose. Suddenly twisted her body, catching off guard. She seized the grappling hook line that remained fastened to the car, and used the man's face as a foothold, pushing off it to gain momentum. With remarkable accuracy, the figure landed back on the rooftop, moving in a way that sent chills down anyone watching. The color drained from the man's face as he realized she had returned. He swiftly snatched the grappling hook launcher from where it rested on the passenger seat. Once he finished reloading, he extended his upper body through the sunroof and took careful aim at the spot directly beneath. He fired the gun without a moment's pause, reacted instantly to the sharp snapping sound, whipping her body around in an instant. The hook swung past, barely failing to catch its target. The fabric of her damaged fur coat split even further as the tear widened. The hook sprang ahead, catching firmly onto a traffic sign in the distance. The car surged ahead, causing the launcher to slip from the man's grasp. The force hoisted off the ground, suspending her from the sign as if she were a prize on display. The man released a long-held breath, convinced that danger had passed and they were now safe. He watched as she let the coat slip from her shoulders and stepped onto the road, her bare feet touching the ground. She kicked off her high heels and lowered herself into a position ready to sprint. The character then propelled themselves forward with explosive speed, cutting through the air like a rocket. She chased after him without shoes, quickly closing the distance between them. The man shouted in alarm. In a frantic rush, he flung open the trunk and began tossing out bags, tools, and anything else his hands could grab. Despite every obstacle, nothing could hinder her pace. Pressed forward with unwavering determination, Gang clenched the axe more firmly in her hands, bracing herself for the next confrontation. Had drawn so near to the house that her wild, ragged breaths could be heard through the window. His eyebrows knitted together as a deep blush spread across her cheeks. The man shouted in fear, realizing she was on the verge of changing into something else. At that moment, minutes suddenly began to perspire, a cold sweat breaking out across their skin. Her breaths came in ragged bursts, her entire body shaking, but soon her movements started to subside. At last, she collapsed onto her knees, letting out a furious, anguished roar that echoed her overwhelming frustration. For the moment, they managed to lose her. The group continued onward, steadily increasing the gap between themselves and the turmoil behind them. After reaching a secure distance, the members of the Bite gang descended from the rooftop with composed ease. She and her team started making their way toward the group. The man lifted his hand to signal them to halt, his eyes filled with caution as he silently questioned their identities. The group faced their opponents with confidence, introducing themselves as the Brotherhood Northern Resistance, declaring that they too were men of strength and integrity. The man lost his composure, unable to contain his frustration any longer. He dismissed everyone around him as frauds, convinced that none of them were genuine. A member with spiky hair interrupted, clearly taking offense, and insisted that they represented the men of a new generation. The figure was human, made of flesh and blood, undeniably real. The man offered offered no protest. With a calm demeanor, he simply inquired if he was free to leave. Gang took a determined step forward, refusing to back down. He chose to remain with his companions, ready to defend their cause. Together, they prepared to uphold men's rights. The man pressed his fingers to his temples, feeling overwhelmed. He wished for peace, longing for somewhere he could simply breathe. A sense of frustration built inside him, as if his mind might burst from the tension. The tone among the group shifted, becoming more intense. They spoke of a world now dominated by women, one that had become dangerous for men. Despite this, they continued to fight back. They looked to him, seeing him as their emblem and their last bit of hope. Surrounded by a crowd of hopeful faces, the man noticed the desperation and sincerity shining in their eyes. At last, he voiced the question that had been pressing on his mind, wondering if she would allow him to go even if he refused. Upon hearing his question, the group began to move forward together, their steps cautious but determined. The man clenched the gear shift more firmly, his gaze unwavering and full of intent, as if he might speed away at a moment's notice. Rather than launching an attack, Gang took off a necklace she had been wearing and extended it forward. No matter where the journey led, displaying this would ensure that their allies would come to their aid. The man took the offer, his emotions a mixture of gratitude and inner turmoil. Without any hesitation or embarrassment, he proceeded to request an assortment of weapons, gas, and various survival gear. The women from the Brotherhood displayed unwavering composure as they passed the items to the group, their faces shining with pride. The man, touched by how generous they were, exchanged a friendly fist bump with the narrator's friends, silently expressing his gratitude for their kindness. He faced the group, lifted his fist in the air, and expressed his gratitude to everyone, calling them his brothers. The men continued to persevere, determined to prove their strength and courage. Even as the last traces of sound hung in the air, his car sped away, disappearing swiftly beyond the distant horizon. The Brotherhood crew stood motionless, utterly stunned and unable to react. Within moments, the Brotherhood burst into jubilant celebration. They declared their strength and unity, insisting that true men never fall and that their battles were fought in the name of manhood. Inside the car, observed the festivities through the window, her voice quiet as she remarked that the crowd held a deep respect for him. The man expressed his annoyance by rolling his eyes and letting out a scoff, silently judging everyone around him as completely crazy. No one could have guessed that the final survivor on Earth would be a heavily made-up man with a sharp, sarcastic attitude. After leaving the Brotherhood behind, he and Yi traveled northward. When they neared the bridge, they spotted a barricade ahead, yet the area appeared completely deserted. The man emerged, his purpose focused on removing the scattered rubble. Without warning, several women leapt down from the bridge above, catching him off guard and surrounding him. Overwhelmed by panic, he spun around and sprinted away, urgently shouting for Yi to hurry and get the car started. Before he had a chance to get to the door, several more vehicles surged into the area, blocking every possible way out. The man drew his weapon, his voice ringing out with a bold challenge as he signaled his readiness for the confrontation. A moment passed before someone knocked him off his feet, slamming him to the ground. In an instant, restraints were fastened around both him and forcing them down onto their knees. A girl with 2 ponytails, clearly the leader, moved ahead of the group and insisted on finding out their origins. Both of them immediately spoke up, each giving a different response without hesitation. That moment marked the limit. With suspicions of espionage hanging over them, the group faced imminent danger as their captors prepared to push them from the bridge. Driven by panic, Yi blurted out words in her native dialect, passionately insisting that she and her companion had no connection to espionage. The twin-tail commander narrowed her eyes, an uneasy feeling creeping over her, and signaled for her squad to halt. She instructed her team to prioritize bringing the others back immediately. The man appeared completely exhausted while he sank into the seat of their car. They arrived at an enormous property featuring an impressive gateway, where the name, Manor, stood out in striking letters. As the two made their way across the courtyard, the man's eyes widened with astonishment. Surrounding them, women dressed in traditional Han attire moved gracefully about. The scene resembled a historical drama set in the past, rather than the harsh reality of a post-apocalyptic refuge. The women carried themselves with such grace and sophistication that it was impossible not to notice. The man, evidently drawn to this atmosphere, found himself stealing additional looks at them, even as he was being held. In time, the group reached a picturesque pavilion, its surroundings filled with the cheerful sounds of women's laughter floating on the breeze. A handful of panda cubs sprawled on the earth, playfully rolling and tumbling together. Amidst the ruins of a shattered world, their tranquil presence created an almost dreamlike sense of calm. The girl with 2 ponytails pushed the man away, her eyes narrowing with suspicion as she sensed an unusual quality about the pair before them. A woman named Qing Yin occupied the central seat within the pavilion, her presence marking her as the leader. She fixed her gaze on the man before her, remaining silent for an extended moment. The man shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his anxiety growing with every glance he cast in her direction. An uncanny resemblance to unsettled him, and he silently wondered if the two women might be related. If that were the case, it seemed he had narrowly avoided one terrifying ordeal, only to stumble right into a different one. After an extended pause, Ching-yin finally broke the silence, acknowledging that the person before them was indeed the man in question. The rest of the women drew in sharp breaths and immediately shifted their attention to the scene unfolding before them. The man remained composed, responding with a collected air as he questioned what had revealed his true identity. Ching-yin rose to her feet, her lips curling into a faint smile. She noticed the fragrance in the air and realized it was unmistakably masculine. Tried to steady himself, reminding himself there was nothing to be anxious about. They decided to treat the other person just like everyone else, offering neither special favors nor unfair treatment. With no other choices left, the man reluctantly allowed Yi to accompany him as they entered the pavilion together. As soon as he took his seat, the women gathered eagerly around him, pressing pastries toward his lips as if he were a king being honored. At the same time, the girl with twin ponytails rested her back against a nearby pillar, watching him intently as her eyes gleamed with sharp, thoughtful intent. The man, his cheeks bulging with food, mumbled to Ching-yin that if she truly saw him as an ordinary guest, she should prove it by allowing him to leave, remained composed and explained that there was no reason to prevent departure. If someone truly wished to leave, they were free to do so. The man and the girl with twin ponytails stopped moving, stunned by what she had just said. He regained his composure in an instant, his eyes narrowing with suspicion as he wondered if the other person truly meant what they said. Ching-yin flashed a cunning grin, making it clear that the offer was genuine, though there was an important stipulation attached. The challenge required the other person to defeat their opponent in a contest called Fee Wailing, a poetic duel centered around a single, selected word. Each participant would alternate in presenting lines of verse that included the chosen word, and whoever stumbled first would lose the match. The word selected for the day was heart. A woman dressed in green moved with elegance as she approached, gently gliding her sleeve along the man's cheek. In a tender voice, she spoke words about finding a genuine love and remaining together for a lifetime. The man answered calmly, his expression unwavering. Across the lands of hearts burdened by pain wandered aimlessly. Once grand palaces had crumbled, leaving only ruins and drifting sand behind. A woman dressed in yellow walked behind him and softly placed her hand on his shoulder. As she did, thoughts filled her mind. The mountain held its wood, the tree bore its branch, yet her heart yearned for him, unseen and unnoticed by the one she cared for. Yi, unable to contain anger at the shameless flirting, lost composure. Deep inside, Yi believed that their heart was different from others. They would always choose youth over godliness. A woman dressed in purple approached from behind, moving with a seductive grace. She lamented that neither bees nor butterflies ever came near her. Her red robe had disappeared, and her heart felt tired and worn out. The man ignored her presence, his voice steady as he declared that his heart felt lifeless like dead wood, and his body seemed to drift aimlessly like a boat. The woman dressed in purple robes pursed her lips in exaggerated annoyance as she faced Ching-yin. She expressed that, when she tried to give her heart to the moon, it only ended up brightening the dirty street below. The man reached for a pastry with steady hands and bit into it. As he chewed, he declared with certainty that even an aged horse still longed to race across great distances, and that a hero's spirit remained fierce even as night approached. Ching-yin had kept a close watch on him from the start. When she heard what he said, she understood that this man was not someone to be underestimated. Her opinion of him changed in that moment. Right as the lady dressed in green prepared to speak once more, Ching-yin lifted her hand, signaling for the others to stop their teasing. She noticed how they tried to appear shy and alluring, but she knew that to him, they looked more like demons hungrily reaching for his flesh. The girls pressed their lips together in disappointment, silently agreeing that he was incredibly dull, almost like an oblivious monk untouched by worldly matters. Faced the man, her voice soft as she expressed her understanding of his feelings. She encouraged him to eat and assured him that, once he finished, she would guide him out. Before the man had a chance to reply, Ying moved quickly ahead with a sense of urgency in her tone, insisting that Ching-yin must not let him go. Ching-yin poured her tea with a steady hand, her demeanor relaxed and unhurried. She considered that he was an adult capable of making his own choices, and wondered aloud who they were to interfere with his decision to go. Unless, of course, someone had a particular reason to prevent him from leaving. Acted without a moment's pause, driven by an undeniable desire to be close to him. Gasps rippled through the pavilion as her voice rose above the crowd, boldly declaring her desire to have his children. Had more to say. With this man in their grasp, their side finally had an advantage for the upcoming northern campaign. The faction would likely align with them, and the northeastern army might break apart. The chance to unite the whole region had become real. To them, he was their secret weapon. Ching-yin stopped midway along the path, her voice carrying a calm edge as she silently disagreed with the situation. She looked over her shoulder, her face composed yet resolute, and silently questioned whether had forgotten their rules by entering the estate in such attire. Ying stopped in her tracks, realizing the truth in the accusation. She had indeed ignored the manor's customary dress rules. She immediately regained her composure, her eyes blazing as she jabbed a finger toward the man and declared with unwavering determination that his opinion was irrelevant. She was resolute in her intention to spend the night with him. At that moment, she whirled on her heel and marched out of Manor, her group hurrying after her. Even Chingin, who was typically calm and composed, showed a fleeting hint of doubt on her face. She eventually spoke to the man, explaining that within the estate he would remain protected, but once he stepped beyond its walls, his fate would rest in his own hands. The decision on how to proceed belonged to him alone. The man released a deep, weary breath, wondering to himself why his life could never stay ordinary, even for a short while. Ultimately, he chose to remain at the manor, hoping to enjoy a few days of tranquility. The following morning, he exercised in the pavilion, lifting a stone bench as if it were weights. While he worked out, Yi approached, her face glowing with excitement as she skipped over. She eagerly showed off her new clothes, clearly hoping for his approval. Wore a graceful, her hair styled neatly into an adorable bun. The new look gave her an extra touch of playfulness and made her appear even more enchanting than before. The man flashed a wide grin and gestured for her to take a seat. He challenged her to an arm wrestling match, insisting that she use all her strength, jokingly referring to it as her full baby bottle strength. Despite giving it her all, she was quickly defeated, unable to put up much of a fight. She massaged her aching wrist and pushed out her lower lip in frustration, feeling wronged by the situation. In her mind, it seemed clear that the other person was picking on her simply because they couldn't win against anyone else, using her as an outlet to boost their own confidence. The man hurried to express his regret, softly rubbing her wrist in a soothing manner. He quietly spoke under his breath, confusion lingering in his mind. Lately, it seemed as if every person he encountered belonged to the White Gang. Their fighting style was unusual, as if each member possessed an uncommon strength. At that moment, Qingyan approached with curiosity, wondering what the other two were up to. The man glanced upward, a playful smile spreading across his face as he invited others to try their luck at arm wrestling. At first, she shook her head, making it clear that those types of games didn't appeal to her. After persistent urging, she eventually relented, letting out a weary sigh before taking a seat. Just a moment passed before she smiled at him, regardless of whether she had allowed him to win, and remarked with a playful tone that it seemed men were still the stronger ones. The man looked at his hand with a sense of letdown, realizing things had not turned out as he wanted. Without warning, he suddenly questioned her about how she knew Ing and what kind of connection they shared. Responded in a calm and collected manner, explaining that was responsible for physical strength while managed the resources, took care of the battles and supplied the funds. Working as a team, they maintained the stability of. She glanced upward unexpectedly, a grin spreading across her face, as if the very person on her mind had just appeared. The man spun on his heel and almost lost his breath in shock. Right behind him stood, wearing only a delicate silk garment from the old tradition. Startled, he cried out and sprang up onto the stone table, confusion written across his face as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. Folded her arms across her chest, her expression composed as she reassured that her intentions were harmless. She merely wished to sleep beside the other person, not cause them any harm. Joined the conversation, her face bright with a cheerful grin. She admired the woman's beauty and wondered why anyone would be so tense in her presence. That incident pushed the man over the edge, his patience shattered completely. Inside, he demanded to know why he was expected to accept such treatment. Now that everything had changed, he wondered if she believed she could simply turn the tables and take control over him. The other person accused them of treating her as if she were nothing more than a pet or a toy to be kept around for their amusement. The woman was told that her hopes were nothing more than fantasies. The character insisted on controlling their own fate, making it clear that if anyone was going to initiate intimacy, it would be them choosing to be with the other person, not the reverse. Lifted his shoulders in a casual shrug, acting as though none of it mattered. He seemed to think there was no real distinction, brushing aside any hesitation. Without a hint of embarrassment, he challenged the other person to an arm wrestling match, declaring that the winner would get to share a bed with the loser. The man shouted angrily, declaring that he would be with every other woman this way before he would ever consider her, and insisted that she should keep dreaming if she hoped otherwise. He strode away angrily, pulling along as he insisted that they were going to catch dragonflies. That evening, Ing strode into the manor, clutching a bottle of alcohol. She gulped down a large mouthful, and color rushed to her cheeks, turning them bright red. Without any prior indication, she forcefully threw the bottle to the ground, shattering it instantly. The girl burst into the man's bedroom, slamming the door open with a loud crash. That night, she declared with determination that she would emerge victorious. She marched toward him with determination, causing him to retreat quickly as fear flickered in his eyes. He searched beneath the pillow and retrieved a small fruit knife, gripping it tightly to protect himself. Despite the threat, who led the corps remained completely unfazed. Without hesitation, she struck him with such force that he was sent sprawling backward onto the bed, limp and helpless as if he were a discarded doll. Lunged forward and pressed the man down against the bed, bed, holding him in place with unwavering strength. She resolved to demonstrate her physical superiority. The man showed no signs of yielding. Instead, he clenched his teeth around her ear in a stubborn act of defiance. Blood began to trickle from her ear as his face grew grim. Deciding to respond to the challenge, she prepared herself for what was to come. She pushed her sleeves higher up her arms. Without showing any hesitation, the attacker unleashed a relentless barrage, striking him across the face 18 times in quick succession. The man found himself completely overpowered by her astonishing strength. Realizing he was outmatched, he fell to the ground, utterly defeated. Showing no hesitation, removed his clothing as he lay motionless and gasping for air, asserting that this was necessary to thoroughly examine every aspect of their battle. After the intense struggle, she was left breathless, beads of sweat sliding down the side of her face. As she glanced at the man who now stood without any clothes, a gentle change stirred within her. Right when she was on the verge of showing him an unusual bit of kindness, he sprang ahead and slammed his forehead directly into her nose. Despite the force of the headbutt, the commander of the Xiong Corps remained unfazed, her strength and resilience clearly evident. Seething with anger, she seized the man's collar and demanded to know if he had completely lost his mind. Without warning, she lunged forward and delivered a powerful headbutt that echoed with intensity. Crimson droplets burst into the air, and her opponent collapsed to the ground, defeated. Although Ing's fury had not yet cooled, she continued her assault, landing blow after blow to his face without pause. She screamed, demanding to know if she wasn't good enough for him. The speaker accused the other person of rejecting them, while being willing to sleep with anyone John brought around, implying that the other acted like a self-important ruler selecting concubines. The words cut deep as someone reminded him that he was nothing more than an object to be used, a tool, a possession, an obedient creature. They made it clear that he held no real power, certainly not the status of a noble, and absolutely nothing close to royalty. When she was done, the man lay on the ground, battered and swollen, his face marked with cuts and bruises. He drifted in and out of awareness, all his strength drained away. Fixed her gaze on him, her eyes briefly betraying a hint of remorse. Although she wondered if she had been too harsh, she wasn't about to forgive him. She motioned to a girl nearby who had been observing the scene and instructed her to hand him the stamina pills. With his lips dry and broken, the man let out a final, raspy sound of rebellion, forcing the harsh letters F//KU from his mouth. The girl attempted to tip the blue pills past his lips. The man rejected every single one, forcing them from his mouth. Her complexion lost its color as worry washed over her. Internally, she panicked. Meanwhile, he stopped himself from speaking further, biting his tongue in regret. Stood motionless, stunned into sobriety by the sudden shock. Realization dawned: this was the final survivor, and he would rather end his own life than become someone else's pawn. Should he truly perish, she understood, nothing would remain for her to manipulate. After a chaotic struggle, Ing and the girl managed to prevent the man from harming himself by biting his tongue. Lost her temper, demanding to know what was wrong with the other person. At that moment, Qin Yin entered the room, walking in on a scene of utter disorder. Her expression grew stern as she demanded that Yin release him immediately. In just half a minute, the enemy would arrive at the front line, so it was crucial to secure her and start setting up defenses without delay. Ink showed no sign of fear. With a steady voice, she assured that she would finish soon, all while remaining poised above the man. Seethed with anger, silently demanding that the other person move away. She glanced at the girl standing next to her, thinking that would be able to escort her outside and help her clear her head. Despite being urged to leave, Ing remained stubbornly in place, insisting on completing the task before agreeing to go. That incident pushed Qingyin to her breaking point. Normally composed and patient, she lost her calm and made it clear through her sharp glare that if he was touched one more time, their alliance would come to an end. A warning was issued, making it clear that any further interference would result in the complete loss of the Corps' resources and backing. The threat extended further. If they dared leave, they would be forever barred from re-entering across the river. Once it became clear that Qin Yin was serious, she reluctantly climbed down from the bed, her annoyance still evident. She approached Qin Yin and quietly demanded to know what his problem was. He was the only man left in the world, and she knew it was a bad idea to take advantage of him. Confused, she wondered aloud if the plan was to turn him into a sort of trophy or symbol. En's voice grew gentler as he reminded that the man was a human being, not something to be played with. Interrupted before the other person could finish, then strode away. Without looking back, she dismissed the conversation, remarking that he was useless at the moment and that the other person could keep him if they wished. She instructed Zhou to remain where he was and watch over the person in question. Once the crowd had dispersed, the man remained by the lakeside, his solitude deepened by the silence around him. The hardships he had faced weighed heavily on both his body and mind, leaving him utterly exhausted, and he gradually walked closer, wondered aloud what Tang would do next, since her previous attempt had failed. She speculated that Tang might be considering throwing herself into the water. The man let out a faint, strained laugh as he reflected on his earlier beliefs. He had assumed that a society led by women would be more compassionate, but now he realized that kindness had nothing to do with gender. Instead, he understood that everything revolved around the pursuit of power. He glanced upward, meeting her gaze, and wondered silently what intentions she held for him. Took a seat next to him, and with a steady voice, encouraged him to regain his composure, reminding him of his desire to reach. The man's lips curled into a sly smile as he stared at the floor, clearly unfazed. He dismissed their tactics, certain they were only pretending with their good cop, bad cop act, and accused them of never planning to release him. Raised her eyes to meet his, her expression steady. She insisted that her true desire was to have him out of her sight as quickly as possible. In her view, he was far less important than he believed, and holding on to him would only cause trouble for all of. The man lifted his gaze in shock, his battered and puffy features bearing the marks of repeated blows. He asked if she wanted the last man alive, and Chinyin immediately confirmed that she did. His eyes widened in surprise as she spoke with such straightforward honesty. The man gazed at the poised, resolute woman before him, his mind replaying the times she had defended him, offered him refuge, and confronted Ying on his behalf. Everything he experienced awakened new feelings within him, emotions both gentle and perilous. He spoke in a hushed voice, quietly saying Kai's name. His lips swollen, he moved closer and gently pressed a kiss to her cheek. Chinyin abruptly rose to her feet, her tone as cold as ice. She declared her desire for a real man, making it clear that the person before her did not meet her standards. His expression shifted to one of disappointment as he struggled to process what had just been said. Chinyin gazed down at him with a resolute expression, recalling how the men she once knew never allowed themselves to collapse into self-pity whenever circumstances turned unfavorable. The man gestured toward the puffiness and discoloration on his face, his expression filled with self-pity as he silently questioned whether anyone truly believed he wanted to end up like this. Despite being utterly defenseless, the protagonist had managed to endure in a world overrun by terrifying creatures. Now, someone dared to dismiss those struggles as a minor inconvenience, leaving the protagonist in disbelief at such a claim. Qingyin ignored his sudden display of emotion. Calmly, she remarked that she had believed she'd discovered the final man left in the world, yet before her stood nothing more than a boy experiencing his first journey away from home. The man offered no protest. With a weary sigh, he rose to his feet and began to walk away. As he continued on his way, he quietly admitted to himself that they were right. Without power, he was insignificant. He resolved to return to. Qinin fixed her gaze on his back, her voice growing sharper as frustration built within her. She believed that true manhood wasn't measured by strength alone. It was determination, logic, self-assurance, and unwavering resolve that truly defined a real man. Her voice grew cold and firm as she reminded him that returning to was no longer an option. She warned that his days ahead would be filled with turmoil, and any hope for tranquility had vanished. The only thing he truly possessed, the one weapon unique to him alone, was his own determination, a strength no one else in the world retained. Without facing the speaker, the man quietly remarked that the description given did not fit an ordinary person, but rather sounded like that of a superhero. Qingyin spoke with a steady, determined tone, declaring that being the sole individual left required one to rise above all expectations. In a world where only a single person remained, that person would have no choice but to transform into a hero. The man came to a halt, continued, recalling how he had been questioned about the reasons behind women's transformation, his status as the sole remaining man, and the absence of anyone else for the past 3 years. No one had the answer, but the opportunity was there for someone to discover the truth, not only for themselves but for everyone else as well. They believed that if the solution couldn't be found here, the next step was to search in North America. If it remained elusive, the journey would continue to Europe, Africa, or any other place necessary. Their determination drove them to keep searching, no matter where the path might lead, until they uncovered what they were looking for. Despite everything, the man remained collapsed, his body limp and motionless like a balloon that had lost all its air. He spun around, quietly remarking that although it sounded clever, he doubted anything would actually change beyond those walls. Suddenly raised his voice, making it clear that the other person was missing the point. He insisted that they weren't escaping death. Instead, he warned that North America wouldn't offer safety, comfort, or tranquility. According to him, what awaited them was only disorder, terror, and uncertainty. He realized there was no escape. Confronting the challenge was his only option. Only by doing so could he regain his strength and demonstrate his maturity. Within the confines of the courtyard, he was stripped of everything: power, liberty, and even his sense of manhood, leaving him with nothing at all. The man fell silent, his expression suggesting he was lost in thought or perhaps simply feeling nothing at all. Without speaking, he climbed onto the garden wall's edge and without hesitation, plunged headfirst into the lake below, sending up a spray of water. He remained determined, refusing to surrender. That jump marked a significant change in his life. Inspired by Qingyin's encouragement, A new resolve awakened within him. With his mind made up, he set out on a quest to uncover the reality behind the shattered world around him. Before he departed, he made an effort to leave in someone's care, wishing that she would be treated and protected as though she were a true younger sibling. Responded with a determined shake of her head, making it clear that she would not be left behind. In the ruins of their broken world, their bond had grown deeper than simple companionship. Now, they depended on one another for everything. At sunrise the following morning, led both the man and herself to the entrance of Manor. Just beyond the entrance, a line of guards stood ready, weapons in hand, making it clear that no one would be getting through. His eyes narrowed as she motioned for the others to move out of her way. The women paused uncertainly. Despite their fear of Qing Yin, they remembered their strict instructions. Nobody was permitted to leave. Without saying anything more, Qin Yin swiftly delivered a powerful roundhouse kick. A sharp noise echoed as a guard was suddenly hurled backward, his body limp and uncontrolled, resembling a discarded puppet. She crashed forcefully against a parked car, causing the windshield to splinter into pieces. The sudden impact left everyone around her motionless, stunned by what had just happened. Qing Yin raised his voice so loudly it echoed like a storm, boldly declaring that he would act as his own escort and daring anyone to try and stand in his way. With determination in her step, she advanced ahead. As she moved, the women have stepped aside, creating a clear path for her as if the crowd itself were parting. Just beyond the city's edge, Ying arranged her fleet of battle trucks in an orderly line, ensuring each vehicle was positioned precisely. Far off on the horizon, another line of vehicles sped aggressively in their direction. Dominating the central tank was an intimidating woman, unmistakably Jean. Known as the merciless commander of the Northern Army, she had her sights set on claiming the man as her own. Her procession sped over the open grasslands, with a force and presence that matched those of Xiang and Might. The atmosphere buzzed with unease as the rival groups stood opposite each other, their confrontation unavoidable. The lieutenant reached for the walkie-talkie, firmly pressed the button, and issued a single command for the team to advance. Without warning, a crimson semi-truck on the left suddenly sprang into action. Its tires shrieked against the pavement as it surged forward, hauling a thick steel cable behind it and barreling directly into the turmoil. At that same instant, a green truck on the right suddenly sprang into motion, its engine growling and its tires squealing as it sped ahead, pulling a steel cable behind it just as the red truck had done. Concealed by the tall grass, the heavy cable linking the two trucks jerked tight without warning, pulled so straight it resembled a dangerous snare. The Northern Army convoy raced ahead at maximum speed, unable to respond in time. Cars crashed into the cable one by one, causing tires to explode and windshields to break apart. The people inside were tossed around helplessly, resembling flung through the air. In a matter of moments, the scene descended into complete chaos. Even before any weapons were discharged, the Northern Army suffered significant casualties. Thick clouds of smoke rose upward, filling the air. The sounds of wounded soldiers calling out in agony surrounded the battlefield. Jean lifted her arms high, giving the order for her convoy to come to a halt. Without casting a single look at those who were injured, she climbed onto her vehicle and called out, asking if there had been any sign of her husband. Ink ignored the provocation, her tone cutting through the tension as she demanded to know if the ceasefire was being violated. Ji gave a sly smirk and with a mocking tone, remarked on Min's alluring clothes, suggesting that she was clearly dressed to attract attention. His face grew stern, her eyes narrowing with determination as she prepared herself for the conflict ahead. She silently accepted the challenge, ready to resolve the dispute immediately. The warning was clear. As soon as Qin Yin led the Southern League into the fray, holding onto would become impossible, even for a single day. Jean Minnow rolled her eyes, her thoughts focused on a single priority. Treaties and leagues held no interest for her, and she wished others wouldn't waste her time with such dull topics. Hearing this, hands balled into tight fists. The memory of last night's fiasco still lingered, fueling her irritation until it finally boiled over. She insisted that she had not seen the man in question. His tone grew frigid, her words threatening that should anyone attempt to cross the river, she would not hesitate to eliminate every man in sight. Jean responded with a sly grin, thinking to herself that girls from the south always seemed to bring a bit of trouble. At the same time, Qin Yin took the wheel and drove both the man and Yi in the direction of Shanghai. The city streets appeared spotless and well-organized, where women in stylish clothing wandered calmly, giving the impression that disaster had never reached this area. Gazed through the window, a wistful expression softening her features as she thought about her, and wondered if she might ever return, even in the absence of anyone awaiting her. Responded with a quiet nod, assuring her that she could, while cautioning her not to let the memories cause her pain, since the world had changed so much. At that moment, the man's eyes narrowed as he noticed something unusual in the alley below. A circle of women gathered close around an individual, their hands reaching out as they spoke in playful, teasing tones. The individual lay sprawled on the floor, slipping in and out of consciousness, showing no strength to fight back. What caught the man's attention was the other figure's short, buzzed hair and rough stubble. This This wasn't an ordinary person. It was unmistakably another man. Shock rooted him in place. For a moment, disbelief washed over him. He had believed himself to be the only man left alive. So who could this stranger possibly be? The man raised his voice, urgently telling someone to halt the vehicle. Qingyin's attention was drawn to a scene ahead, where she noticed a man being confronted by two women who appeared to be bothering him. Both Qinyin and Yi shifted their attention toward the alley, glancing down its length. They had already gone by, making it impossible to catch a glimpse of anything from where they were. The man loosened his, preparing himself to jump out. Qinyin issued a stern warning, insisting that leaving would be pointless because the situation was beyond their ability to repair. Despite this, his companion retorted with determination, insisting they had no choice but to try since the person in trouble was one of their own, another man. Qinyin argued back, emphasizing the danger and reminding him that the area had already been swept clean, so there shouldn't be any men remaining. The man ignored the warning and reached into the back seat, pulling out a weapon, determined to find out the truth on his own. He raced toward the alley and found a confused, mustachioed man being dragged by the arm. One of the women standing nearby mocked him, questioning his ability to endure even a single night and doubting his manhood. The man with the mustache tried to struggle, but his feeble attempts barely made a difference. The man lifted his gun and demanded that they release him. The woman glanced in his direction, her expression brightening with excitement as she noticed that this option was even more appealing than the previous one. Her friend let out a flirtatious laugh, her eyes sparkling with mischief, and the sound of her voice sent shivers down the listener's spine. The man noticed that the women remained calm, so he pulled back the hammer of his weapon, making a sharp echoing sound to signal his threat. As soon as they understood he was serious, any trace of amusement disappeared from their faces. Suddenly, a pair of bright headlights flooded the alley with harsh light, causing them to squint and shield their eyes against the temporary glare. Qin brought the car to a stop next to the man, the lights on the roof continuing to blink brightly. The women shielded their eyes against the glare, and when they made out the numbers on the license plate, shock settled on their faces. One of the women quietly speculated that the newcomer was associated with the government. Realizing they were not in too deep, the pair stepped away, releasing mustache guy with a sense of annoyed disappointment, exited the vehicle, prompting a nearby man to relax and lower his weapon as the atmosphere grew calmer. As he moved forward beneath the glow of the headlights, his eyes locked with mustache guys, each watching the other with equal caution. A man's gaze traveled over mustache's smooth abdomen and gently lifted chest, and in that instant, a chilling understanding dawned on him. He extended his hand and gave mustache's face a gentle pull. As expected, a light tug caused the false mustache to detach easily. He felt a heavy weight settle in his chest. Words had proven true from the start. Not a single other man could be found in this place. Mustache's eyes landed on the necklace around the man's neck, a necklace that looked exactly like the one Bai Gang had given him, the token representing the men's defiance. Mustache's eyes widened in shock as he realized who stood before him. A thunderous bang erupted, abruptly silencing her. In that instant, a speeding car had collided forcefully with Qingyin's vehicle. The glass of car windows burst apart without warning. The force of the crash hurled her against the airbags, leaving a thin stream of blood running down her forehead. The front of the other vehicle had been crushed, with dense smoke billowing out and the airbags already inflated. Beneath the debris, emerged completely unharmed, a sly grin playing on her lips. She glanced over, her expression filled with mischief, as if to silently boast about how difficult it had been to locate him. Against all odds, she had managed to slip away from and follow their trail to this exact spot. Eyes grew wide with alarm as she urgently told the man to escape, insisting that she would handle the situation herself. His chest tightened with dread as he realized the woman had tracked them down yet again, her persistence unyielding and her presence in this place both surprising and alarming. Jumped onto a neighboring car and urgently commanded her driver to pursue the others. Without saying anything else, the man seized his hand and dashed away, determined to escape immediately. Near the edge of the alley, an old bicycle rested against the wall, catching their attention. With no time to hesitate, he quickly placed Yi into the front basket and began pedaling as fast as he could. Meanwhile, Six exploded out of the alley, chasing after them with a frightening, relentless speed, resembling a predator in pursuit of its target. The man toppled each table and chair he encountered on the road, determined to create obstacles that would hinder their pursuit. The brief obstacle slowed their pursuers for just an instant, but soon enough, they began to close the distance once more. At that moment, you noticed a handgun concealed at the man's waist. She reached out confidently, her fingers moving swiftly to disengage the safety, a motion that revealed her familiarity with a weapon. The man stood frozen in disbelief, unable to comprehend when she had become skilled with a firearm, lifted the weapon and pointed it toward the oncoming pursuers. However, her hands trembled, and she could not bring herself to pull the trigger. As the adversary advanced, she nervously pressed her teeth into her lip, clenched her eyes tight, and yanked the trigger. A gun fired, but the bullet failed to hit its mark, slicing through the air without causing harm. The weapon tumbled from her grasp and clattered onto the hard ground. Feeling completely overcome, she lost consciousness and collapsed face first. The man lunged forward, grabbing hold of the back of her shirt at the last possible moment. One hand firmly held her while the other frantically pushed the pedals. He sped ahead, refusing to glance behind him. When he approached a crowded intersection, he abruptly cried out a warning about spies from the Northern Army. Everything unfolded just as he anticipated. The moment the crowd noticed the pursuers, an air of animosity swept through them, and the women's gazes sharpened with suspicion. Sensing the shift in mood, the agents hesitated, their pace faltering as they realized the risk of angering the gathered women who now blocked their way. Seizing an opportunity, the man slipped quickly into a cramped alleyway. His followers, however, were experienced. After assessing the area briefly, they separated, moving around to cut him off from both directions. The man looked over his shoulder, but when he saw that the path was empty, an uneasy coldness crept through his chest. He gazed intently at the road stretching before him, suspecting that their pursuers were likely looping back around. Approaching the intersection, he braced himself, his muscles tightening in anticipation of an unexpected confrontation. At that moment, a door beside the road swung wide, and someone urgently beckoned them inside. The person standing before him turned out to be the very same imposter with a false beard whom he had saved only moments earlier. Without hesitation, he seized Yi and rushed out the door. Only seconds after their pursuers reached the scene, their sharp gazes searching every corner of the street. However, there was no trace of the man to be found. As she lifted her gaze to the sign hanging over the doorway, her expression became suddenly rigid. Carved into the worn surface of the wood, the words Brotherhood of Men and Branch caught her eye, sending a sudden wave of anxiety through her chest.
Lately, I've had a strong addiction to watching manhwa and manga recap videos. Every single day, I find myself binging one after another, losing hours and days doing absolutely nothing productive. And honestly, it's getting out of hand. So, maybe we can make these viral videos too. I mean, look at the views, the growth, the community these creators are building. It looks simple, right? But that's a trap. You go down this endless rabbit hole, spending money, losing sleep, hiring editors and writers from Fiverr and Upwork, and still feel like you've been robbed. Because don't forget how emotional the YouTube algorithm can be with making videos go viral. It's unpredictable, especially when the market's saturated, competition's relentless, and somehow other creators are dropping 10-hour videos daily while you're stuck trying to finish one. That's when I realized something had to change. So, I built the solution, the Webtoon Narrative Suite, a complete one-click system that handles everything from cropping, script narration, text-to-speech, image processing, and full video generation in one smooth process. Save money, reduce hours of work, and have a tool that only gives you straight results. Click on the link down below and experience it for yourself. And if you want even more tools to supercharge your YouTube recap journey, visit my Ko-Fi and Patreon pages where I drop weekly new tools designed to keep you ahead as AI continues to steal our jobs. So tap in now before you get left behind.